David chose our 10th wedding anniversary to do it. 10 years. There were candles, that overpriced restaurant in Tribeca he always loved to show off, and a Napa Valley Cabernet so expensive its mere aroma smelled like guilt. I, Olivia, simply observed the game. I had been a consummate actress for the last 2 years. Tonight was merely the final scene of the first act. "Olivia, honey, we need to talk about something serious," he said, setting his wine glass down. His tone was smooth, rehearsed, as if he were about to announce a failed investment. "No, the end of our world. Tell me, David." "I'm listening," I replied, taking a small sip of water. The wine didn't interest me. I needed a clear head. He let out a theatrical sigh. "This isn't working anymore. Us. We've grown in different directions. You know it as well as I do." "Different directions," I repeated, keeping my voice neutral. "Interesting way to put it." He ignored the comment. "I've thought a lot about how to make this as clean and quick as possible. And above all, for Chloe's stability, I propose the following." He paused, making sure he had my full attention. "I keep everything. The estate in Greenwich, the Upper East Side penthouse, the company shares the investment accounts, all of it. You get to walk away free, unattached, so you can start over." The silence stretched between us. It wasn't born of shock, but of anticipation. I had rehearsed this mentally hundreds of times. So far, everything was going according to the script. "And Chloe?" I asked, locking my eyes on his. A fleeting shadow of discomfort crossed his face. Then the mask of the reasonable man slipped back into place. "She is the most important thing." "But look at reality, Olivia. You haven't been well lately. That history of depressive episodes. I have a stable home. The resources to give her the best education, the best private schools. It would be selfish of you to drag her into uncertainty. I'll take full custody. You can see her, of course, whenever it's convenient." There it was. He didn't just want the loot. He wanted to rip our daughter away from me, weaponizing my visits to the therapist, those very sessions he had insisted I needed to overcome my apathy. Rage, my old friend, peeked its head out, but I drowned it beneath a slab of polished ice. "So that's your proposal," I said, my voice strangely calm. "You take the entire fruit of a 10-year partnership. It's not about taking it all, Olivia," he corrected, with a hint of impatience. "It's about simplifying. It's avoiding a dirty war that would only damage Chloe. You sign, you leave, and we can all move on. I assume all the responsibilities. It's what's fair." Fair. The word echoed hollowly in my head, like the sound of a nail hitting a coffin. 2 years ago, that word would have made me explode. 2 years ago. The discovery of those first emails on his laptop, the messages to Sarah, his partner in that import-export business, had destroyed me. But the acute pain had transformed over time, fueled by a fierce patience into something else, into a plan. "All right, David," I said. The smile that touched his lips was broad, genuine. The smile of a hunter who believes he has bagged his prey without firing a shot. "I'll sign. Everything just as you say for Chloe. Keep it clean." His relief was palpable. He reached his hand across the tablecloth as if to touch mine, but stopped himself. "You're being reasonable. You always were. I knew you'd understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly," I whispered. He paid the check with his platinum card, the one with both our names on it. We drove back to the Greenwich estate in silence. He handled the Mercedes with a lightness he hadn't shown in months. I looked out the window at the illuminated New York skyline in the distance, a city that suddenly felt alien, yet full of possibilities. Upon arriving, he went straight up to his study, probably to call Sarah and give her the great news. I stayed in the kitchen, massive and cold as a showroom. I waited. The ticking of the wall clock marked the rhythm of my new life. When the house was in complete silence, I grabbed my phone, a cheap prepaid burner I bought at different convenience stores every 2 months. Only one number was saved. I dialed. He answered on the second ring. "Yeah." Frank's voice was gravelly direct. He wasn't my lawyer. He was something better. He was my private investigator, my shadow, my archivist of betrayals. "It happened tonight," I said without preamble. "Everything just as we expected. He wants the house, the penthouse, the accounts, the company, and Chloe. He's using my therapy sessions as leverage." Frank snorted on the other end of the line. "The arrogant bastard. No shame at all. And you?" I accepted. I said yes to everything. A brief silence followed. I could almost hear the old wolf's grin. "Perfect. He's swallowing it, hook, line, and sinker. Arthur is going to have a heart attack when you tell him you don't even want to fight for the welcome mat." Arthur was my official divorce attorney. A well-meaning but conventional man who truly believed my depression had beaten me into submission. He knew nothing about Frank, nor about Emily, my other lawyer, the one who operated in the shadows. Let him have it, I said coldly. It's necessary for the performance. And the other matter, the Cayman account, done. The movements are all documented. The payments to Sarah's shell consulting firm, the wire transfers from the corporate account to the personal one, it all lines up. And I have the key document. The loan. My pulse quickened. Signed and sealed 18 months ago, Frank continued. In your name from that Swiss bank using the assets of the alternate LLC as collateral. The one he doesn't know exists. It's yours, Olivia. All legal, impeccable, and entirely out of his reach. A tingle of pure power of delayed justice ran down my spine. For 2 years, while David thought I was sinking into melancholy, I had been digging into his finances, his lies, his parallel life. With the discreet help of Frank, a retired NYPD detective with few scruples and a sharp sense of vengeance, and Emily, a ruthless attorney specializing in dismantling arrogant men, I had built a legal and financial labyrinth of which David didn't even know the entrance. I didn't have depressive episodes. I had strategy meetings. I didn't cry at the therapist's office. I studied financial disclosures. While he and Sarah played at being lovers and tycoons, siphoning funds from their own company with the greed of amateurs, I was rebuilding my fortune brick by brick in a place he would never think to look. Good, I took a deep breath. Then we begin. Tomorrow I call Arthur and give him the news. I want to see David's face when he signs the separation agreement and thinks he's hit the jackpot. Careful, Olivia, Frank warned, his voice dropping an octave. The most dangerous moment is when the prey thinks it's safe. Don't underestimate his pride. If he feels mocked, he can be unpredictable. He won't feel mocked, I said, looking down the dark hallway that led to my daughter's room. He'll feel like the smartest guy in the room right up until the day he doesn't. Until then, let him enjoy his victory. It will be his last. I hung up. I leaned against the cold marble countertop. In the reflection of the dark window, my own image stared back at me. I was no longer the Olivia of 2 years ago. The wounded woman who cried in silence. That woman had died replaced by someone else, someone with dry eyes and a plan that was above all a promise. The house, the money, the titles, let him keep them. He was merely guarding the ashes. The fire, what truly mattered, was already safe with me. And soon, very soon, Chloe would be too. The game had begun, and he didn't even know he had already made his first move and that it was the wrong one. It was the forgotten laptop that started it all. 2 years ago, David had rushed out to an emergency meeting with Sarah. A theatrical phone call, a grave voice, a furrowed brow. I handed him his briefcase while he cursed the Manhattan traffic. His laptop, his older MacBook, was peeking out from under a pile of mail on the entryway table. He didn't usually take it. He had a newer one at the office. I was about to put it away in his study when it chimed. A mail notification on the lock screen. A preview. David Babe. The numbers aren't tying out. I moved the offshore stuff. Check the attached PDF. S. The email address S. Rachel@atlanticinvestments.com. Sarah Rachel, his dynamic partner who had restructured the import division of David's family business. The same woman who at the last holiday party had adjusted his tie with a familiarity that made my blood run cold. It wasn't a sudden outburst of emotion. It was slower, denser, a gray fog seeping into my veins. I set the laptop on the desk. My mind. Clouded by months of a lethargy he casually labeled late-onset postpartum apathy was suddenly crystal clear. I typed in the password, the same one we used for all our shared devices. Chloe2013, the year our daughter was born. The laptop unlocked with a dry click like the lid of a casket. I didn't have to dig deep. He had the browser open a Gmail session logged in. It wasn't his primary account. It was a burner. David, private, wealth, @gmail.com. A man so careful, so obsessed with control, committing the ultimate rookie mistake, laziness. The emails were a manual on infidelity and corporate fraud. Sarah's emails were full of heat mixed with financial jargon. Last night was incredible. Your wife doesn't suspect a thing, does she? From what you say, she's too depressed to notice anything. Another. The wire to the Cayman account is done. I used the fake invoice from the Swiss consulting firm. Your wonderful wife signed the authorization without even looking. She's still so lost. Poor thing. And there was my scanned signature. On a document authorizing an $85,000 payment to Helvetic Consulting Group, I remembered that piece of paper. David slid it in front of me one exhausting night, while Chloe was crying with a fever. It's just for the accounting software renewal, honey. Sign here, it's urgent. And I, my mind focused entirely on my sick child, had signed. I looked down the empty hallway. The silence of the house was absolute, save for the hum of the laptop. And then something broke. It wasn't my heart. It was something colder, more structural. The illusion, the trust, the love shattered into a million pieces. And in the vacuum, it left behind something new began to grow. A silent, razor-sharp determination. Without hesitating, I took out my phone and took pictures. Dozens of photos of every email, every attachment, bank statements with accounts in tax havens. Then with surgical precision, I closed everything. I put the laptop back exactly where it was. I sat on the sofa and waited. David returned 3 hours later, smelling of expensive cologne and feigned exhaustion. A disaster, Liv. Those idiots can't do anything without me. I smiled at him. You must be exhausted, honey. Do you want a drink? As I poured his Macallan, my hands didn't shake. My mind was a field of ice. I had crossed a threshold. I was no longer the cheated wife. I was a strategist. The next day, after dropping Chloe off at her private school, I took the train into the city and went to a dingy cyber cafe in the Lower East Side. I created a new email account with a random name and searched for Private Investigators NYC. Discretion. Frank Donovan's website wasn't flashy. It had one line in a specialized directory: corporate and asset investigations. Low profile. I called from a payphone. Yeah, a voice answered, sounding like sandpaper. I need to verify some things about my business partner. I hesitated deliberately. And what things do you want to verify, Mrs.? Olivia, I said using my real name. Sometimes blunt honesty is the best lie. I want to verify if he's stealing from me, and who he's sleeping with. There was a pause. Proof. Do you have anything? I have photos of emails, wire transfers, invoices I signed without knowing. Bring whatever you have tomorrow at 1100 a.m. The diner on the corner of 34th and 8th. I'll be reading the Post. Frank was a man in his 60s, wearing a slightly oversized suit with eyes that never seemed to blink. I passed him a manila envelope with printouts of the photos. He looked through them unhurriedly over the course of an entire cup of black coffee. Your partner is a lucky amateur, he finally said, setting the photos down. But a dangerous one. He's siphoning funds, and this woman, Sarah, isn't much smarter. This reeks of tax evasion, embezzlement, maybe even wire fraud. Small scale. But it's there. What do I do? My voice sounded smaller than I intended. He looked right at me. That depends on you, Olivia. Do you want to cry, or do you want to win? The question hung over the sticky diner table. I want to win, I said. And the words tasted like raw metal. But not just in court. I want it so that when this is over, he has nothing. Absolutely nothing he thinks is his. A slow, barely perceptible smile spread across Frank's lips. That's more expensive. And slower. And it requires you to act entirely differently. Explain. Right now, you are a wounded, depressed woman. Keep doing that. For him, for the world. But here with me and with the person I'm going to recommend to you, you will be made of ice. You will learn, you will sign where we tell you, you will transfer what you can little by little. We will build a net outside his reach and wait for him to get overconfident, to make his fatal mistake. Greed always trips over its own feet. And then, he said, folding the envelope, then we pull the rug out, the floorboards and the foundation. That was how I met Emily Hayes, young, impeccably tailored with a cutting intelligence. Her office in a discreet Midtown South building didn't have the mahogany glamour of David's corporate firms. It had filing cabinets and a dual monitor setup displaying endless spreadsheets. Frank caught me up, she said without small talk. Your situation is classic. Husband with joint assets but opaque business dealings. You have signing authority. You are a co-manager on some of these LLCs. That's a double-edged sword. It can make you liable, but it also gives you power. I don't want power. I want justice and security for my daughter. Justice is slow. Security is fast if you know how to play it. She opened a file. I need access to everything. Tax returns for the last 5 years, deeds, LLC, operating agreements, all of it. And from now on, at home, you need to be a wilting flower. Weak. Utterly disinterested in money. And my daughter, Chloe Emily, looked at me, and for the first time, her expression softened a fraction of an inch. She's the key. Everything we do must be on paper to protect her future. We'll establish an irrevocable trust in a favorable jurisdiction with discreet contributions from you. We'll siphon it out slowly. It's her shield and her inheritance no matter what happens to her father. The following months were a masterclass in duality. With David, I was the same Olivia, just a bit duller, a bit more distant. I started seeing a therapist, the one he recommended. I told her my fears, my lack of energy, The doctor confirmed to him in confidential terms that I was suffering from an adjustment disorder with depressive symptoms. David swallowed the hook. My weakness was his comfort. Meanwhile, with Frank and Emily, I was more alive than ever. I learned about holding companies. Delaware shells, Swift transfers, I used my personal expenses, my wife allowance to start moving money. Small, unnoticeable sums to an account under a Panamanian foundation Emily controlled, then into a trust for Chloe. One day, reviewing old documents with Emily, we found the treasure. The mistake David never saw. Olivia, this is incredible. Emily pointed to a clause in the operating agreement of Atlantic Investments LLC, the company he shared with Sarah. Here, in the event of the dissolution of the marital bond of any of the partners, and if there is evidence of conflict of interest or breach of fiduciary duty, the injured party has the right to request the forced liquidation of assets to settle their position pending signature of both spouses. I frowned. I don't understand. It's an old-school spousal protection clause. Someone threw it in years ago, probably their initial boilerplate lawyer. Your husband and his mistress signed it without reading it, and you signed it too as a spouse and co-owner of some of the collateral assets. Her eyes gleamed. If we can prove David's breach of fiduciary duty to the company, and to you as an indirect stakeholder, we could force the liquidation of the business, right when he thinks it's entirely his. It was the first piece of C4. The rest came later. The payments to phantom vendors, Sarah's fake invoices. The Cayman account where they mixed corporate and personal funds. Frank tracked them. I filed them away silently. One night, David came home euphoric. We closed the massive deal with the Tokyo investors live. This puts us in a whole new league. He hugged me. He smelled of triumph and expensive vodka. I let him hold me my cheek against his chest, where his heart beat fast with ambition. Not for me. I'm so happy for you, David, I whispered, my voice appropriately muffled. I really am. And it was true. I was happy. Because the higher he climbed, the louder the crack would be when he fell. My revenge wouldn't be a scream, it would be a sigh. The sigh of relief from a man who thinks he's won right before he realizes he's signed his own ruin. While he dreamed of penthouses and yachts, I dreamed of a document. A loan. A massive bank loan requested in my name, using the assets of a small shell company Emily had created for me in Delaware. As collateral, a company that was secretly the owner of a chunk of the funds I had been siphoning off. A loan that would appear at the exact right moment as a colossal personal debt. A debt that when it dropped on David would crush him. 2 years. 24 months of fake smiles and shadow moves. Until last night. Until he, in his sheer arrogance, offered me the Faustian bargain. Give me everything and I'll set you free. And I said yes. Because the freedom I sought wasn't running away from him. It was watching him fall and recovering from the rubble of his ambition, the only thing that had never belonged to him, my life. And my daughters. Dr. Valerie's office was a cubicle of manufactured peace. Potted fiddle-leaf figs, soft lighting, a beige linen sofa. I settled into the armchair, not the sofa. Sofas were for people who wanted to sink. I needed to appear vulnerable, not utterly defeated. How did the week feel? Olivia Valerie crossed her legs, her legal pad on her lap. She was young, empathetic, and completely manipulable. David's recommendation had been masterful. The best in the city for trauma and low self-esteem. I sighed, letting my shoulders slump a fraction of an inch. The same. Empty, like nothing matters. David says I need to try harder, that Chloe needs a present mother. My voice was a studied thread designed to sound broken but not hysterical. Valerie nodded compassionately. That must be very hard. Your husband is demanding, but he wants to help. He pushes me to take an interest in the finances in the house. He says, distracting myself with practical things will do me good. I paused, looking at my hands. But every time I look at a bank statement, my heart skips a beat. The numbers terrify me. It was my most useful lie. I had turned my supposed phobia of finances into my best weapon. At first, David had tried to explain charts and balance sheets to me. Now he just slid the papers across the table for me to sign. Sign here. Honey standard stuff. And I, with a trembling finger, would stamp my signature on documents that Emily, later in the privacy of her office, would tear apart with a wolfish grin. Your fear of the numbers is a symptom, Olivia. A block. Your mind associates control and power with the harm you perceive with the feeling of having lost control of your life. Valerie took notes. Notes that I was certain she summarized in progress reports that fed David's narrative Olivia fragile, incapacitated to handle stress or complex assets. Maybe he's right, I murmured. Sometimes I just want someone to take care of everything, to leave me in peace. The last part was true. The session continued. I talked about my guilt for not being more vibrant, my fear of letting Chloe down. I shed a few perfect tears. Just enough. Walking out, my eyes slightly red, I found David in the waiting room. It was his surprise, his way of showing what a concerned, committed husband he was. "Everything okay, babe?" he asked, throwing an arm around my shoulders. His touch burned me. I nodded weakly. "Yes, Dr. Valerie is helping. Of course she is," he said, guiding me toward the elevators. "You'll see, little by little, everything will go back to normal." There was a note of triumph in his voice. His broken wife was his perfect alibi. A weak creature who couldn't and wouldn't fight for anything. In the Uber back to the house, my primary phone buzzed. A text from Emily at a prearranged time. Meeting, new material. Interesting. My heart did a different kind of flip this time of anticipation. New material was the code phrase. "David, do you mind dropping me off near Madison Avenue? I need to pick up those vitamins the doctor recommended, and there's a pharmacy there." He frowned, but it was a mild complaint. My treatment was sacred. "Sure. Want me to wait?" No, honey. You go back to the office. I'll catch a cab. I need to walk a bit. Think." He accepted with a distracted nod, his mind already on his next email, his next call with Sarah. He dropped me at the corner. I waited until the black town car disappeared into the traffic. Then, with quick steps that had nothing to do with the slow gait of depressed Olivia, I walked 3 blocks and slipped into a crowded Starbucks, passing right through to the back exit and into an adjacent office lobby. Frank and Emily were already in the conference room. Before them, 2 black coffees and a manila folder. "Any tale?" I asked, sitting down. "You're clean," Frank said gruffly. "Your husband was lost in his own world. We've got something." He pushed the folder toward me. Inside were blurry photos taken with a telephoto lens. David and Sarah leaving a discreet building in Midtown. It wasn't their office. It was a high-end corporate law firm. In another photo, they were signing a document at a table visible through a glass wall. "What is it?" I asked, though I already had a hunch. "A capital restructuring," Emily said, her fingers tracing an attached document filed with the state. "The two of them have created a new class of preferred shares in Atlantic Investments and distributed them among themselves using the profits from the Tokyo deal. Formally, it's legal, but it dilutes any residual stake you might have had, Olivia. It pushes you out completely." "I was already out," I said, but I felt a sting of anger. It was another layer of his contempt. "Yes, but this is different," Emily continued. "It's preparation. They are cleaning up the LLC, turning it into something solely theirs before whatever it is they are planning. A divorce, a sale, a new round of funding. They're bulletproofing themselves from each other." Frank pointed to another photo. "And there's more. Look." The next image was of a bank, a private wealth management branch of Chase. David alone, talking to a senior executive. "That's not his usual bank," I asked around, Frank said. "It's for a line of credit. A massive one using the Greenwich estate as collateral." The air caught in my throat. "Our house. The one I signed the deed for, too. The one that, according to our old verbal agreement, was supposed to be Chloe's nest. He can do that. He holds the deed. You signed the power of attorney years ago, remember? So he could manage things with agility." Emily's tone was neutral, but her eyes shone with contained fury. "He's tying up loose ends, securing liquidity, probably to buy your silence in the divorce, or to invest with his mistress. He's turning everything into debt or untouchable assets." I stared at the photos, David smiling confident, Sarah leaning on his arm. They were building their future on the foundation of my past. The rage from 2 years ago threatened to melt the ice into pure hatred. I took a deep breath. "The Delaware loan?" I asked, my voice recovering its frigidity. "Ready," Emily said, pulling out another document. "Approved. It's a line of credit in your name, guaranteed by the assets of the shell company. A massive amount of money, Olivia. It will appear on paper as an astronomical personal debt. When it's discovered at the right moment, it will look like you desperately took out a loan, or that your husband took it out in your name without you knowing. The confusion will be catastrophic." "And the Cayman account?" I asked Frank. "Active. I got the transaction history for the last 3 months. He slid over a few pages of numbers. "Here. Transfers from Atlantic Investments to Sarah's personal account, then from Sarah to David, and from there. Payments to phantom vendors, a ski condo in Aspen, and huge cash withdrawals. They're bleeding the company dry. Olivia, you found the tip of the iceberg 2 years ago. Now they're taking the whole thing." It all fit. His rush for the divorce, his generous offer to keep everything. It wasn't generosity. It was a cleanse. He wanted to keep the clean assets, the sanitized company, the newly mortgaged house, and leave all the rot, the hidden debts, the phantom accounts as a poisoned gift for me. Or more likely, let it all blow up after the divorce, splashing onto me, the ex-wife. I smiled. It was a smile without warmth that made Frank nod almost proudly. So we have everything I said. Almost, Emily corrected. We need the masterstroke, something that ties all their actions to an undeniable federal crime. Right now, it's his word against yours on a lot of things. Tax evasion, embezzlement. They're hard to prove without a confession or a massive screw-up. He's arrogant, not stupid, I muttered. Everyone is stupid when they think they've won, Frank murmured. And he's about to feel like a huge winner. That was when it hit me. The idea arrived complete, cold, and perfect. There's a meeting I said next week with the Tokyo investors to sign the final contract. David is obsessed. He says it'll be at the plaza, a huge event. Frank and Emily looked at me expectantly. I need to be there, I continued. Not in the meeting. In the hotel. I need something to happen. Something that forces him to make a stupid decision with Sarah in front of people. Something we can record. Emily rolled her eyes. Olivia, this isn't a movie. We can't stage a public scandal. We don't have to stage it, I said, my plan taking shape. We just have to nudge it. David is nervous about the Japanese. They are very formal, very traditional. They value loyalty, family. Any rumor that there are personal problems affecting his reliability, a mistress, for example, and possible financial irregularities in his company, it could blow the whole thing up. A light of comprehension began to gleam in Frank's eyes. Are you thinking of a leak? Something like that? An anonymous call to the investors' due diligence team warning them that Mr. David Rachel might have personal issues affecting his trustworthiness. And mentioning the phantom vendors. Emily whistled softly. It's risky. If they investigate and find nothing, they'll walk away anyway, and David will go on high alert. But if they find something, even a slight stench of rot, the Japanese are cautious. Frank mused. They'll pull the offer or demand impossible guarantees. David will panic. And when a guy like him panics, he does stupid things, like moving money in a rush or pressuring his partner to take the fall. I looked at both of them. I don't want the Tokyo deal to completely sink. Not yet. I want it to be about to sink. Just enough for him in his panic to make a mistake, a recordable mistake. There was a long silence. I can make that call, Frank finally said, from a secure line with an untraceable footprint. But the content. I need concrete data. Something that sounds credible but isn't a direct accusation. The Swiss consulting firm, I said immediately. The one on the invoice I signed. Helvetic Consulting Group. Frank, do you have proof they don't exist? A slow grin spread across his face. I have a photo of their offices in Zurich. It's a mail drop above a bakery, and the director is a retired actor. I have the photos. Perfect. The caller warns that Atlantic Investments uses phantom vendors. Mentions that name, that's verifiable. And then casually mentions that Mr. Rachel has a romantic relationship with his business partner, Miss Rachel, which represents a massive conflict of interest. I leaned forward. It's not an accusation. It's a warning from a well-meaning insider. Emily nodded slowly. It could work. If the investors do even minimal due diligence, they'll find Helvetic is a ghost. That plants the seed of doubt. And doubt in a $50 million deal is a tombstone. Then we do it, I said. There's a problem, Frank said. The venue. We need to have David and Sarah under surveillance at that exact moment to catch their reaction. And you, Olivia, can't be anywhere near it. You'd be the immediate suspect. I thought fast. The plaza has the Rose Club. It's quiet in the afternoons. I could be there supposedly having tea with an old college friend. Plausible. Far from the meeting rooms, but inside the hotel. You, Frank, can be close by with a directional mic. If there's yelling and argument. Too unpredictable, Emily said. We need something more secure. Something that guarantees they talk and that we can hear them. Her car, I said suddenly. She drives a new Range Rover, Bluetooth. Can we bug it? Frank shook his head. Too difficult, too risky. No, but her phone. Sarah is careless. If we get her to use her phone to call him from a public place when the tension peaks, a place we choose, I finished feeling the plan locking into place. The hotel's underground parking garage. Service is spotty. People sit in their cars to take calls on the speaker, Frank conceded. But I need access to her phone. Just for 5 minutes to install a simple mirroring app. That's easier, I remembered. Next week is the industry charity gala. They're both going. Sarah always checks her clutch at the coat check when she goes to the powder room. She's terribly careless. Frank's eyes sparkled. Give me the date, time, and venue. I gave it to him. The gala was at the Metropolitan Club, a place I knew well. I'll do it, Frank said. The call to the investors and the spyware on the mistress's phone. We'll catch the conversation if it happens. It will happen, I said with a certainty I didn't entirely feel. Under pressure, he will call her or she'll call him. They'll point fingers. Greed and fear are very talkative. Emily closed her folder. Meanwhile, I will keep tracking the Cayman money and prepare the paperwork for the divorce settlement. You have to sign the waiver of marital assets with the utmost nonchalance. Arthur, your official lawyer, is already drafting the documents. He thinks it's a tragedy. He's trying to find clauses to protect something, anything. Let him try, I said. His genuine desperation will only lend credibility to my surrender. We paid for our coffees, leaving separately. I walked out onto the street. The afternoon light hit my face. I took a deep breath, and the mask of the tired, depressed woman settled back over my features. I slumped my shoulders. The gleam of determination in my eyes vanished, replaced by a fog of exhaustion. When I got home, David was already there, pacing in his study on the phone. Yes, everything is under control. Don't worry, it's just a matter of time. He hung up and smiled at me, a wide, satisfied smile. Everything okay? Sweetheart. Yes, David. Just a little tired, that's all. I stepped closer and let him kiss my forehead. His scent, expensive cologne and lies, was almost suffocating. Get some rest. Soon everything will be easier, you'll see. His hand caressed my shoulder. A gesture of ownership. I know, I whispered, looking into his eyes. Soon everything will be much easier. And for the first time, I wasn't lying. The family dinner was a monthly torment, a tradition imposed by my mother-in-law, Eleanor, at her sprawling Upper East Side co-op. Baccarat crystal inherited silver, and a silence that weighed more than the dry-aged prime rib. David, sitting at the head of the table, was listing the virtues of the new Swiss boarding school he wanted for Chloe. It's a unique opportunity, Mother. Bilingual. Global networking from day one. She needs to be prepared for the world that's coming. My daughter, sitting next to me, pushed her mashed potatoes around with her fork, her eyes glued to her plate. She was 11, and for months she had been quiet, withdrawn. The tension at home was a wall that she, with the raw sensitivity of a child, perceived perfectly. It sounds terribly expensive, David Eleanor commented, using that tone of faux concern she had mastered. Her eyes sharp as a hawk's darted from her son to me. But of course, with how well everything is going for you now, right, Olivia, the question was a poisoned dart. She knew I didn't work. That I lived off her son. Her son, the prince. Yes, David is doing very well, I murmured without looking up. I had stopped trying to have real conversations with her months ago. It was all theater now. Of course I'm doing well, David said, topping off his wine glass. And that's why I want the best for Chloe. So she never lacks for anything. He placed a hand over mine on the table, a cold, calculated gesture. To his mother, he must have looked like the ultimate protector. To me, it was a brand. That is my commitment, right, Olivia? No matter what happens, our daughter will always be secure, always covered. That is the only thing that matters. There was the phrase, the one I had been waiting weeks to capture. No matter what happens. A conditional future full of empty promises. I felt the tiny, hard weight of the burner phone in the pocket of my skirt. The recording app had been running since we sat down. A slight bump of my elbow against my side had activated it. It's a relief to hear you say that, David, I said, looking up at him. I let my eyes well up slightly. The candlelight did the rest. I looked deeply moved. With everything that's happened. Knowing Chloe is your priority. It gives me peace. My voice trembled just enough. He squeezed my hand. She always has been, honey. You know that. His smile was magnanimous, the benevolent king distributing alms. We'll sign whatever it takes. A trust, an insurance policy, whatever. She's our blood. The only pure thing in all this mess. Eleanor let out a dry scoff. Well, that's the bare minimum. The child isn't to blame for the problems of adults. Her gaze swept over me, evaluative and dismissive. Though sometimes children pay for broken plates, especially when parents don't know how to handle their affairs. The hit was direct. To her, the mess, the problem was me. My failure to adapt, my depression, my inability to be the brilliant society wife her successful son deserved. The divorce in her mind was entirely my fault. Affairs are handled as best they can be, Eleanor, I said, keeping my voice low submissive. Sometimes the simplest thing is to let go so no one else gets hurt. Letting go is for the weak, she snapped. The Rachels don't let go of what is ours. We fight. She looked at her son with fierce pride. That's why we are where we are. David looked momentarily uncomfortable. He didn't like the confrontational tone. Not here, not now, when he had everything so carefully orchestrated. Mother, please, this isn't the time. Olivia is making a great effort, and Chloe comes first. As I told you, there will be no battles. Just an orderly transition. He looked at me pleading or pretending to plead for complicity. Right, Liv, an orderly transition, I repeated like an echo. I made a slight motion, as if dabbing an invisible tear with my napkin, and with the same movement under the table, I pressed the button to stop the recording. I had it. His voice clear as day, promising security for Chloe no matter what happens. It was pure gold. In a custody hearing, those words spoken so calmly could be used to prove his paternal intentions or to highlight his utter hypocrisy when everything came crashing down. The dinner dragged on a torture chamber of banalities. Eleanor talked about her socialite friends, the outrageous Hamptons real estate prices, the importance of belonging to the right circles. I nodded absently while my mind reviewed the audio file. The quality was good, minimal background noise. When the maid began clearing the plates, Eleanor tipped her head toward the living room. Olivia, come help me with David's old photo albums. I want to show Chloe how handsome her father was at his prep school graduation. It was an order, not a request. Chloe looked at me with pleading eyes. She didn't want to be left alone with her father, who was already checking his phone with a distracted scowl. Go with your grandmother, sweetie, I told her, forcing a smile. I'll be right there. Eleanor was already seated on the velvet sofa, a massive leather-bound album on her lap. As I sat next to her, the smell of mothballs and stale Chanel enveloped me. You don't have to fake it with me, child, she said, without looking at the photos. Her voice was low, raspy. I know you're plotting something. My heart gave a violent lurch. She knew. How had I slipped up Frank Emily? I forced a laugh. A weak, strained sound. Plotting Eleanor? I don't know what you mean. Shut up, she cut in sharply. She finally looked at me. Her pale, icy blue eyes pierced right through me. I'm not stupid. I've seen women like you before. Docile on the outside, vipers on the inside. My son is a man, and like all men, an idiot. He thinks money and promises fix everything. He thinks you're a frightened little sheep he can just lock up in a prettier pen. She turned a page showing a young David in a blazer, smiling confidently. But I know you. I've known you since the day you walked into this house with that timid smile and those eyes that saw everything. You don't give up. You're planning something. Something dirty. Her bluntness was a low blow. There was no contempt in her voice now, but rather a kind of tired, resentful respect. I took a deep breath, searching for my mask of the exhausted woman. I'm not planning anything, Eleanor. I just want peace for me and for Chloe. David can keep everything. I don't want to fight. Liar, she spat, lowering her voice even more. Nobody gives up everything. It goes against human nature, unless what you want isn't what you're giving away. She pinned me with a glare. What is it? Money in a hidden account, blackmail material, a lover waiting with open arms. I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. A lover was the least of my concerns. I have none of that, I said. And this time my voice rang true because it was. What I want David can't give me. And neither can you. What she asked with genuine curiosity mixed with irritation. Respect, I said simply. I don't want his money or his house or his last name. I want him to look at me and not see a piece of furniture or a problem or a tarnished trophy. I want him to give me back the years I dedicated to being his shadow. And since that's impossible, I'll keep the only thing that was never his, my silence and my absence. Eleanor observed me in silence for what felt like an eternity. Then she sketched a smile. It wasn't a pleasant smile. It was the smile of someone who had just understood the rules of a dangerous game. You underestimate yourself, Olivia. And you underestimate my son. You think your silence is worth something. The silence of losers is worthless. Only the noise of the winners matters. Maybe I don't want to win, I said. Maybe I just want him to lose. The words once spoken hung in the air heavy with perfume and nostalgia. Eleanor didn't seem surprised. She nodded slowly. That is more honest. But you're picking the wrong enemy. My son is a vain fool, yes. But he isn't alone. He has that whore Sarah, and he has his ambitions. And ambitions are a harder shield to crack than hatred. I know, I said. That's why I'm not fighting his ambition. I'm letting it grow like a tumor. For the first time, I saw something akin to a flash of admiration in her eyes. Then it faded, replaced by the usual frost. You will hurt, Chloe. Whatever you are preparing, she will get hurt. She's already hurt, Eleanor, I whispered. And the pain of that truth stole my breath. She's hurt every time her father promises her a trip and bails. Every time he looks at her and doesn't actually see her. I, at least, am going to make sure the wound doesn't get infected, that she doesn't grow up surrounded by lies. She stood up, closing the photo album with a sharp snap. I am not going to help you, but I won't get in your way. My son made his choices just as you made yours. But I will tell you one thing, Olivia. She leaned in, her voice a thread of ice. If you hurt my granddaughter, if you leave a single scratch on her, I will forget that you are her mother. And then you will see what a real war looks like. Not with lawyers and papers, with women. She glared at me, waiting for my reaction. Fear, perhaps, submission. But I was far beyond fear. I had none left. I held her gaze. Chloe is my daughter. The only thing that matters to me in this world. Everything I do is for her, so that one day she won't have to sit at a table and smile at a man who despises her while her mother-in-law reminds her how little she's worth. Eleanor blinked. A twitch of something that might have been pain or rage or both tightened her perfectly painted mouth. Without another word, she turned and walked out of the living room, leaving me alone with the ghost of her young son smiling from the abandoned album on the sofa. I trembled, a deep tremor originating from my gut. The confrontation had been harder than I expected. She knew, or at least suspected. It didn't matter. She had no proof, only instinct. And her warning about Chloe shook me. But it didn't make me hesitate. On the contrary, it was a reminder that I was alone, that I could only trust myself, my plan, and my small network of loyal allies. I walked out to the hallway. David was at the door, putting on his cashmere overcoat. Ready. Chloe is already in the car. He seemed in good spirits, oblivious to the nuclear exchange that had just occurred in the living room. Yes, ready, I said, grabbing my purse. The phone with the recording weighed like a brick. In the elevator, in the oppressive silence, David said, without looking at me, Mother can be harsh, but deep down she wants what's best for the family. Of course, I said, watching the floor numbers light up as we descended. What's best? Driving back home with Chloe dozing in the back seat, David spoke euphoric. I've been thinking, that Swiss school is an investment, but we have to ensure she has sufficient backing. I'm going to set up a trust with the Upper East Side penthouse in her name so no one can ever touch it. He shot me a quick glance. It was his way of telling me that even if I got nothing, our daughter would. A bone to chew on. Alms disguised as paternal love. That's an excellent idea, David, I said with a neutral voice. Inside, a cold smile spread. Yes, set up that trust. Tie that penthouse, which will soon be worthless to your daughter's future. So when everything collapses, your grand gift will be nothing but a pile of debt and broken promises. I knew you'd understand, he said, satisfied. Everything is going to turn out fine. You'll see, Liv. You're going to start a new, quieter life. No worries. I hope so, I whispered, looking out the window as the city slipped by, dark and full of lights. A new life, I thought. Yes, but not the one you imagine. When we got home, I put Chloe to bed. I watched her sleep, her angelic face illuminated by the nightlight. I'm sorry, my love, I murmured, kissing her forehead. But when you wake up, the world will be a safer place for you. I promise. I stepped out of her room and locked myself in the bathroom. I took out the burner phone, plugged in headphones, and played the recording. No matter what happens, our daughter will always be secure, always covered. That is the only thing that matters. David's voice. Warm, convincing, paternal. Perfect. I sent the file to an encrypted server Frank had set up. Then I wiped the phone's history. A minute later, my primary phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. It was Frank. It just said received. Good catch. And right beneath it, another text from Emily. Arthur is ready. Appointment at the law firm Thursday at 10 a.m. Signing of the marital settlement agreement. Don't be late and don't get nervous. Thursday. In 48 hours. The first official signature. The gateway to his trap and to mine. I looked at myself in the mirror. The eyes staring back were no longer those of the frightened woman from 2 years ago. They were the eyes of someone who had planted a seed in the poisoned soil of her marriage. And now, while the confident gardener watered that soil, believing he was tending flowers, the vine of vengeance was slowly breaking through the earth, sharpening its thorns, waiting for the moment to bloom. Arthur, my attorney, had the face of a man who was watching a shipwreck and could do nothing to stop it. His office, modern and expensive, overlooking 6th Avenue, smelled of strong coffee and desperation. In front of him, the pages of the expedited marital settlement agreement lay like a death sentence. Olivia, for the love of God, you have to listen to me. His voice was a harsh whisper loaded with frustration. This isn't an agreement. It's financial suicide. You are relinquishing your claim to the Greenwich house, the 2 investment properties, your share of the marital estate, spousal support, everything. In exchange for what? The joint custody he's offering you as a favor? It's a mockery. I settled into my chair, my hands resting calmly on my purse. The mask of the broken woman was now my official uniform. It's not a favor, Arthur. It's what's best for Chloe. She needs her father. Chloe needs a mother who isn't living in a rented studio because she gave away her entire net worth, he nearly shouted, running a hand through his thinning hair. Look, I understand you're going through a lot, that this is overwhelming, but do not make decisions right now. Let me fight for you. We have arguments. These depressive episodes, he keeps citing. We have expert psychiatric reports that contextualize them, that prove it was a temporary situation aggravated by your environment. No, I said softly, but with a firmness that made him stop. I don't want to fight. I don't want Chloe spending years in and out of family court, watching us tear each other to pieces. David has unlimited resources. I want peace. That is my choice. Arthur looked at me as if he didn't recognize me, and he was partly right. The Olivia who had walked into his office 2 months ago with swollen eyes and a trembling voice had been a character. This one sitting across from him was someone else, calmer, more dangerous. Is it blackmail, he asked, dropping his voice. Is he threatening you with something regarding Chloe? Because if he is, that's highly illegal. He isn't threatening me with anything, I interrupted. It is my free and conscious decision. I looked up and met his gaze. Arthur, you have been very kind. You've done your job, but your job right now is to review the waiver as I've instructed, and accompany me to sign it. Nothing more. He slumped back in his chair, defeated. We sign tomorrow at Robert's office, at 10 a.m. He and David already have the drafts. They are euphoric. He spat the last word with disgust. Good, I said, standing up. Then I'll see you tomorrow. Olivia, he said when my hand was on the doorknob. His voice sounded tired, old. Are you sure you know what you're doing? I turned and smiled at him. It was a sad, resigned smile, perfectly rehearsed. It is the only thing I've been sure of in a very long time, Arthur. I walked out onto the street. The New York sun was harsh, blinding. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of exhaust and freedom. I pulled out the burner phone and dialed. Emily answered on the first ring. Done. Does he think you're crazy or terrified? Both. Perfect. Just as it should be. Do you have the recording from the dinner? Yes. I sent it to Frank. The part where he promises Chloe will be secure no matter what is solid. It's excellent, Emily replied. It proves his intent to provide, which is useless for the custody issue later, but highlights his extreme arrogance, assuming he's the only one capable of providing security. She paused. I heard the clacking of a keyboard in the background. The dossier for the U.S. Attorney's office is ready. I'll deliver it to the federal prosecutor 1 hour after the signing tomorrow. No sooner, I warned. I don't want any leaks. It's all there. The Cayman accounts, the fake invoices, the wire transfers. With an executive summary a child could understand. David and his girlfriend have been remarkably sloppy. They think money in offshore tax havens is invisible. It's only invisible if no one knows where to look. And we just painted a giant bullseye on it. Her tone was one of pure professional satisfaction. Arthur doesn't suspect a thing about me, does he? Not in his wildest dreams. To him, I'm just a tragic victim. Good. Tomorrow at 10 a.m. at the opposing counsel's office. Sign, smile, and leave. Don't look back. Robert's Midtown law firm was cold and impersonal. It smelled of lemon polish and billable hours. David was already there with Robert, a man in his 50s, with a bespoke suit and a shark-like smile that didn't reach his eyes. He greeted me with a nod that bordered on condescension. Olivia, David said, approaching. He looked relaxed, even happy. He wore a new suit ready to start from zero. His voice was jovial, but victory gleamed in his eyes. Ready, I said, in a small voice. Arthur, standing beside me, looked like he was about to stroke out. His jaw was clenched tight. A paralegal brought in the binders. Robert sat at the head of the conference table and outlined the terms of the agreement. Every word sounded like a whip crack. Waiver of all claims to marital property. Waiver of the Greenwich estate. Waiver of the Upper East Side penthouse. Waiver of any equity in Atlantic Investments LLC. Waiver of investment funds, joint bank accounts, retirement plans. In exchange, joint legal custody with a visitation schedule to be determined, which in practice meant Chloe would live with him, and I would get alternate weekends and a symbolic, frankly ridiculous lump sum alimony payout that he had put on the table as a gesture of his generosity. It was a legal stripping, impeccable and total. Do you understand, Mrs. Rachel, the scope of what you are signing? Robert asked, peering at me over his glasses. You are relinquishing practically the entirety of the marital estate. I understand, I said, and my voice rang clear and calm in the silence of the boardroom. You are doing this freely and voluntarily, without any coercion. Freely and voluntarily. The words tasted like ash, but I spoke them without hesitation. David suppressed a smile. Robert nodded with satisfaction. I signed my name Olivia Rachel at the bottom of every page. My signature was fluid, the same one I had stamped on so many documents that had betrayed me. Arthur signed as my counsel, with a look of profound bitterness. When it was David's turn, his signature was fast, energetic. A triumphant scribble. When he finished, he dropped the pen and took a deep breath, as if a massive weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He looked at me, and for a second I thought I saw something like pity in his eyes. Then it vanished, drowned out by sheer relief. It's for the best, Liv, he murmured, placing a hand over mine. I withdrew it gently. Yes, David, for the best. We walked out to the elevator bank. The sun was the same, but the world was different. Or maybe I was. Well, David said, rubbing his hands together. That was much more civilized than I expected. Robert, I'll see you later to finalize the LLC restructuring. Of course, David. Robert shot me one last look, almost of pity. Good luck, Olivia. The two men walked away, talking in low voices, laughing. Two men who had won. Arthur stood beside me, mute. Finally, he said, I don't know what you're doing, Olivia, but I hope you know how to swim. I do, Arthur. Thank you for everything. I offered my hand. He shook it sadly and walked away. When I was alone, I took out my burner phone. I sent a single-character text to Emily S. for signed. The reply came instantly. Received. The package leaves in 30 minutes. I looked toward where David and Robert had disappeared. I felt something strange. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't rage. It was emptiness. A massive, clean vacuum ready to be filled with something new. I had signed my public defeat, and in doing so, I had activated the first mechanism of my revenge. While I took a cab to nowhere in particular, Emily Hayes was walking into a brutalist federal building in Lower Manhattan. She carried a thick, gray dossier. At the reception desk, she showed her bar card and asked to speak with the duty prosecutor in the Economic Crimes Unit. The wait was brief. She was escorted to a small windowless meeting room with a formica table. The assistant U.S. attorney was a young man who looked chronically exhausted. His name was Daniel Ross. Come in, Miss Hayes. How can I help you? Emily placed the dossier on the table. I have information here regarding a case of suspected continuous wire fraud, tax evasion, embezzlement, and potential money laundering. It's complex, but the facts are thoroughly documented. Her voice was cold professional, as if she were discussing a routine traffic violation. Ross opened the dossier. He flipped through the first pages where an executive summary detailed the names David Rachel and Atlantic Investments LLC. Then the bank statements from the Caymans, the invoices from Helvetic Consulting Group with a Zurich mail drop address. Screenshots of internal emails outlining plans to siphon funds, copies of forged signatures, a flowchart of the shell accounts. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the rustling of paper. The AUSA's face changed. The exhaustion gave way to intense, alert attention. This is incredibly thorough, he said, finally looking up. And your client, the whistleblower. My client Emily said, choosing her words carefully, is collateral damage. The spouse, a woman who, until today, has been subjected to severe emotional and financial abuse. Today she signed a divorce settlement, relinquishing her entire estate driven by a state of extreme vulnerability. Every one of the member of companies live today. But before doing so, fearing for her future and that of her minor daughter, she compiled these records. She now feels secure enough to bring them forward. Ross nodded slowly. The story was credible and fit a pattern he saw often. The marginalized spouse who, seeing the ship sinking, decides to air the dirty laundry. What is she asking for? Immunity. A non-prosecution agreement. My client asks for nothing for herself, Emily said, her tone now hard as steel. She only asks that the DOJ act, that this be investigated, that whatever assets remain be frozen and secured for the support of her underage daughter. She has given up everything but her child, shouldn't pay the price for her father's federal crimes. It was the master touch, the selfless mother, concerned only for her child. Ross swallowed the hook. Understood, he said, closing the file. This looks huge. We'll need a sworn statement from your client, and we'll have to move fast before they get wind of it and start liquidating assets or destroying servers. My client is at your disposal whenever necessary, Emily said, but I beg you for discretion. Mr. Rachel is an influential man, and right now he believes he has emerged completely victorious. Any leak would alert him. A barely perceptible smile touched the prosecutor's lips. Don't worry. In this unit, we know how to be discreet, and we love surprises. He stood up. We'll be in touch, and thank you. We don't often get cases handed to us with a bow on top. Emily stood up as well. It's my job, counselor. Have a good day. She walked out of the building. The midday sun blinded her for a moment. She took out her phone and typed a message. Not to me, but to Frank. The package is delivered. The recipient seemed very interested, waiting for a read receipt. Frank's text arrived 10 minutes later while I was sitting on a bench in Central Park, staring blindly at the ducks in the pond. Confirmed. The recipient has opened the package. Digestion has begun. I smiled. A small, private smile. The package was in the belly of the beast. Justice in America was slow, but it was thorough, and it was hungry. My primary phone buzzed. It was David. I hesitated a second before answering. Yeah. Liv, it's me. His voice was strangely jovial, just calling to say, well, everything was very civilized today, and to remind you that Chloe is staying with me tonight as we agreed. I'll pick her up from school. Okay, I said neutrally. And Liv, don't hesitate to ask if you need help finding an apartment or whatever. It was the final nail, the cherry on top of his fake generosity. Thanks, David. You're very kind. I hung up and looked at the water. It was still like glass. But beneath the surface in the depths, things were already moving. The net was closing slowly, silently. He was celebrating his victory, toasting with Robert and probably later with Sarah to his new future free of dead weight, to his intact fortune, to his daughter under his thumb. He didn't know that he had just signed with the very ink of his triumph, the beginning of his end. He thought he had stripped me of everything, but he had only kept the hollow shell, the seed, the venomous. Living seed was already planted and taking root. The Manhattan family court courtroom smelled of floor wax and anxiety, a stale odor that stuck to the roof of your mouth. I sat at the petitioner's table, though I felt more like the accused. Arthur beside me shuffled papers nervously. Across the aisle, David, impeccable in a navy blue Tom Ford suit, whispered to Robert. His posture was relaxed, almost arrogant. He smiled when he saw me looking. A smile of pity. The judge. A woman with sharp features and wire-rimmed glasses entered, and we all stood. With a wave of her hand, she signaled us to sit. She began to review the finalized marital settlement agreement, a legal maze that boiled down to my absolute surrender of everything and David's custody arrangement. Her voice was flat routine. Olivia Rachel, she said, looking over her glasses at me. The court has reviewed your settlement agreement. You are waiving your rights to virtually the entirety of the marital assets. Do you stand by this agreement? All eyes locked onto me. David's secure. Arthur's begging for a miracle. The judge is totally impassive. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the burner phone, my talisman in my jacket pocket. Yes, Your Honor, I stand by it. Arthur let out a muffled sound, a sigh of defeat. The judge made a note. You understand that this waiver is for all practical purposes, total and irrevocable, that you will not be able to claim assets, properties, or future compensation aside from the nominal lump sum payment outlined here. I understand, Your Honor. The judge nodded and turned to David. Mr. Rachel. There were initial filings suggesting pressure or a history of emotional vulnerability regarding your wife. What do you have to say about this? David adopted an expression of pained sincerity. He leaned slightly forward, hands clasped on the table. Your Honor, with all due respect, my wife has gone through a very difficult period. I acknowledge that. We tried to get her help. I stood by her. But her decision to walk away was her own. Freely made. He lowered his voice, as if sharing a confidence. In fact, I offered a more equitable split. She rejected it. She said she didn't want anything that reminded her of our failed marriage. She just wanted peace, and for our daughter to be provided for. That's why I accepted primary custody, to give Chloe the stability that her mother in her current state unfortunately cannot consistently provide. It was a flawless performance. Conciliatory paternal dripping with fake concern. Even the judge seemed slightly moved. Robert nodded gravely. Mrs. Rachel, do you have anything to add? The judge asked. I looked at David, at his eyes shining with the certainty of a man who has already won. I let my gaze fill with the resigned sadness I had practiced so well. No, Your Honor. I just want this to be over, for the sake of my daughter. The judge tapped her pen on the bench. I see. These are difficult decisions. I note the extreme disparity in the asset division, but I also see clear, uncoerced consent on the record. Therefore, I will approve the settlement. Primary physical custody of the minor child. Chloe Rachel is awarded to the father, David Rachel, with a visitation schedule for the mother of alternating weekends and split holidays. The waiver of marital assets is approved as written. The divorce decree is entered. The sharp crack of the gavel echoed in the courtroom like a gunshot. It was officially over. David couldn't contain a broad smile of absolute relief. Robert patted him on the back. Arthur slumped in his chair, rubbing his face with his hands. The judge stood and exited through the rear door. The formalities were over. We stood up. David walked over to me, extending his hand. A final gesture of chivalry. Thank you, Liv, for making this so easy. His voice was warm, victorious. I didn't take his hand. I merely looked at it and then into his eyes. Take care of our daughter, David. Truly. My words sounded like a farewell, but they were a warning. Of course, he said, pulling his hand back without missing a beat. She comes first. He turned and headed for the doors, followed by Robert. It was then that Robert, almost out the door, looked back. He didn't look at me. He looked at Arthur. And on his face, the triumphant expression blurred for a moment, replaced by a flash of confusion, suspicion. His small, penetrating eyes darted from Arthur's devastated posture to me, standing perfectly still and dry-eyed. His sharp, cynical mind must have been running the calculations. Something didn't add up. Arthur's defeat was too real, too visceral, and my resignation was too calm. It wasn't the rage of a scorned woman, nor the hysteria of a broken one. It was a strange, almost unsettling serenity. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second. In his, there was a question. In mine, nothing. Just a flat void. He frowned slightly as if trying to crack a code. Then David called him from the hallway. Come on, Robert. We have celebrating to do. Robert shot me one last, highly suspicious look and walked out. Arthur exhaled a long breath. Well, that's it. You did it. You've lost everything. His tone was bitter. Not everything, Arthur, I said, picking up my bag. Thank you for everything. Truly. I walked out of the courtroom. The marble hallway was cold. In the distance, I saw David's and Robert's backs as they stepped into an elevator. David was laughing, a clear, ringing laugh that echoed in the empty space. The elevator doors closed, swallowing his triumph. I stood there alone for a moment. Then I pulled out the burner phone, a text from Emily. How did it go? I typed back. Divorce entered. Everything according to plan. Robert looked at me weird. He suspects something. The reply came instantly. Doesn't matter. It's too late. The warrants were signed yesterday. Tomorrow morning, first thing. A shiver, this time of pure anticipation, ran down my spine. I closed my eyes. Tomorrow. As I walked down the courthouse steps, my primary phone rang. It was David. I hesitated but answered. Yeah. Liv just wanted to say, don't worry about Chloe. She's fine. She's staying with me tonight. Tomorrow, if you want, you can come pick her up for the weekend. Although, thinking about it, maybe it's too soon. Let me get her settled in first, okay? His voice was sweet, but the intention was clear. Push me away, build walls, get her used to her new life without me. Whatever you think is best, David, I said weakly. You're being so understanding. Really. I'll talk to you later. He hung up. The final hypocrisy. I stepped out onto Center Street. The daylight hit me hard. New York was buzzing around me, oblivious to my drama. I walked into a nearby coffee shop, ordered an espresso, and sat at a table in the back. I needed to think. Or rather, I needed to not think. The burner phone buzzed again. This time it was Frank. Yeah, all good on your end. His voice was rough but carried a hint of satisfaction. Yes, signed and sealed. He thinks he's the king of the world. Well, let him enjoy the crown. The reign is going to be short. He paused. Listen, the search warrants are rock solid. They're going into his office, the girlfriend's office, and pulling records from the banks. They already have the Cayman intel. And there's more. More than the loan. Your loan, the Delaware one. It popped, Frank said. I caught my breath. How? Not the way we planned. Better. It popped in the system organically. A U.S. bank doing a routine cross-risk assessment on his assets. Your name flagged, tied to a multi-million-dollar line of credit. It's routine, but if someone is actively looking like the feds are right now, they'll see it. And they'll ask questions. A lot of questions. I understood. It was the next domino. The loan in my name, which would look like utter madness or massive fraud, and how will they react? First, they'll think it's your debt. Then when they see you haven't touched a dime of that money that it's sitting untouched in the Delaware LLC, they'll wonder what it's for. And then when they cross-reference and see your husband has been siphoning corporate funds, they'll assume it's part of his scheme. Either you knew or it's a monumental mess. The confusion will be absolute. And in the middle of that mess, they're going to nail him to the wall. And me? The question slipped out. Won't they accuse me too? You have an alibi. Emily set it all up. The movements of that money predate your clinically diagnosed depression. It will look like a prudent investment you made when you were well, and that later when you fell into your state, you forgot about. Or that it was your husband's idea and he made you sign. The psychiatric experts we secretly consulted confirm that during this period you were highly vulnerable to manipulation. You're covered, Olivia. As a victim. I breathed a sigh of relief. Thank you, Frank. Don't thank me. Just be ready. Tomorrow when it hits the fan, the sky is going to fall on them. And he will call you. He will scream, cry, threaten. Do not answer. Or if you do, be the frightened, confused wife you've always been. Do not break character. Now more than ever. I know. All right. I'll be monitoring. Emily too. Hang in there. The worst is over. The worst for me. For him, it's just about to begin. I hung up. I drank a sip of the now cold espresso. He was right. The hardest part, the enduring, the faking, the yielding, was over. Now began the collapse. His collapse. I paid for the coffee and walked outside. I had nowhere to go. My house was no longer mine. My daughter was with him. I hailed a yellow cab and gave the address of a small nondescript apartment I had rented in Queens months ago, paid for with funds from the Panamanian account. A generic place in a normal neighborhood. My hideout. My burrow. As the taxi headed uptown, we drove past a luxury restaurant on Fifth Avenue. Through the massive glass windows, I saw them. David, Robert, and Sarah, toasting with champagne. Laughing. Sarah, brunette and elegant in a red dress, was laughing at something David said, touching his arm. He was smiling, expansive. The king of his world. The cab stopped at a red light. I had a perfect view. David raised his glass, said something, and the other two laughed. Then, as if sensing my gaze, he turned his head toward the window. His eyes swept blindly over the street traffic and moved on. He didn't see me. He couldn't see me. I was already a ghost he had left behind starving in the ditch of his life. I smiled from the back of the cab, a smile that had nothing sad about it. I was starving, yes, but I was about to feast. Toast, David, I thought as the taxi accelerated. Toast to your new life, because tomorrow when you wake up it will have turned into a nightmare, and I, the ghost, will be the only one who knows why. My primary phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. It just said, Operation Dawn, H hour 0800. It was Frank, confirming the time of the raids. It was 8:00 p.m., 12 hours until his world so carefully built on lies and theft began to shatter. I arrived at my apartment. It was small, clean, impersonal. No photos, nothing personal, just a bed, a sofa, a kitchenette, and a laptop. I sat down in front of it and opened an encrypted file. It contained copies of everything, the DOJ dossier, the recordings, the bank statements, my treasure, my insurance. I turned on the TV and muted it. Silent images of the local news, of game shows, of other people's lives. I waited. The night would be long, but for the first time in 2 years, I wasn't waiting in fear. I was waiting with the cold patience of justice. My justice. And somewhere in the city beneath the same moon, David was laughing, oblivious that his tomorrow would bring a bloody dawn. 7 days after the divorce was finalized, David and Sarah occupied the best table at Per Se, enjoying Osetra caviar, Krug champagne, and the view of Columbus Circle at their feet. He was wearing a new Patek Philippe, the kind that costs as much as a sports car. She was wearing the red dress from the celebration on Fifth Avenue, now carrying a smile of total ownership. To the new chapter, David toasted, a spark of triumph in his eyes. No dead weight, no ties. To us, Sarah corrected with an intimate look. They clinked glasses. The sound was sharp, fragile. I sent the paperwork to the Swiss bank, he commented, lowering his voice. The transfer from the Caymans. Everything wiped clean into the new Delaware LLC. In both our names. She placed a hand over his. And the house, Greenwich. The new mortgage was approved. With the cash out, we liquidate the last of the old company's credit lines and we keep a massive cushion. Everything is. He smiled broadly. Perfect. It was at that exact moment that 3 men in suits, but with a rigid professional posture, approached their table. They didn't look like waiters. Mr. David Rachel asked the man in front, flashing a badge. FBI. White-collar crimes division. David's smile froze. Sarah set her glass on the tablecloth with a click that was far too loud. Yes. What is this about? David's voice still tried to sound authoritative, but a thread of tension betrayed him. We need you and Miss Sarah Rachel to come with us. We have a few questions. The agent was young, his gaze impassive. Come with you now. This is absurd. My attorney, Robert. The agent made a slight gesture. The other two men positioned themselves on either side of the table. Mr. Rachel, we have warrants. Please, it's better if we do this without making a scene. The entire dining room was watching them. The hushed murmurs ceased. The method wrung his hands in the distance. David went pale. He saw the headlines, the scandal. He felt the floor giving way beneath his Italian loafers. What am I being accused of? He asked, standing up. He tried to maintain his dignity, but he was a cornered animal. Conspiracy to commit wire fraud, tax evasion, embezzlement, and money laundering. For starters, the agent stepped aside, clearing the path. You have the right to remain silent and the right to an attorney. I highly suggest you use both. The ride in the unmarked black SUV, down to 26 Federal Plaza, was a silent hell. Sarah cried quietly, mascara running down her cheeks. David stared out the window, his mind a hurricane. Who had the Tokyo investors dug too deep? A disgruntled employee. A slip-up in the Cayman transfers. Robert was waiting for them in the interrogation room, his face pale and drawn. Don't say anything. Absolutely nothing. They executed federal search warrants based on a highly detailed whistleblower complaint. They raided the offices, pulled the servers, subpoenaed the banks. A whistleblower David cut in, grabbing Robert by the lapels of his suit, who Robert gently peeled David's hands off. His eyes, normally cold and calculating, held a glint of something akin to panic. That's the question, David. The complaint was filed by your ex-wife, by Olivia. The world stopped spinning. The hum of the federal building faded away. What? The word was barely a breath. Yes. She submitted a massive dossier to the U.S. Attorney's Office, the exact same day you signed the divorce papers. With everything, David. Everything. The Cayman wires, the fake Helvetic invoices, internal emails, transfers to Sarah's personal accounts. All of it. That's impossible, David gasped. She doesn't know anything. She's depressed. She doesn't understand finances. Really, Robert's voice was a whip. The depressed woman who signed away everything without blinking. The one who stood in family court looking perfectly calm. Wake up, man. She set a trap and you walked right into it, Sarah whimpered. That bitch. But how? The loan, David asked, a new horror dawning in his eyes. The one in Delaware. The shell company. Robert nodded slowly, bitterly. There's a massive line of credit in her name, yes. The feds think it's part of your network or that you took it out using her forged signature. But here is the kicker, David. When they started freezing your assets, the ones you thought were yours, they found out most of them are leveraged to the hilt. The Greenwich house has a new mortgage that exceeds its value. The penthouse is collateral for a loan you didn't even know existed. And the crown jewel, Atlantic Investments. It's empty. The liquid funds were transferred weeks ago to an offshore trust. He took a dramatic pause, leaning in. In Chloe's name, managed by a trustee who only answers to the child's mother. To Olivia. David leaned against the cold cinder block wall. He couldn't breathe. No, that can't be. I control everything. You controlled an empty shell, Robert spat. While you thought you were stripping her of everything, she was sucking out the marrow. She's been doing this for years. With help, obviously. Someone was advising her. Someone good. That private investigator Sarah muttered suddenly. Remember, David? The one you hired a year ago when you thought you were being followed and then fired? You said you were being paranoid. Frank Donovan. The name materialized like poison. The retired cop? David should have kept him on retainer. He should have bought him off. I need to see her, David said, his voice breaking. I need to talk to Olivia right now. That's not happening, Robert said. And even if it were, what are you going to say? She destroyed you with malice aforethought. And she did it legally. Or at least the parts she did transferring assets, reporting federal crimes, are incredibly difficult to prosecute her for. She has covered her tracks beautifully. She looks like a battered, victimized wife. An agent stepped into the room. Mr. Rachel, the AUSA wants to take your statement. And Miss Rachel's, separately. As he was led down a gray hallway, David felt like he was walking over his own grave. His fortune, his freedom, his reputation, all evaporating. And in the center of the storm, serene and untouchable, was the image of Olivia, his wife, his victim, his executioner. In my nondescript queen's apartment, I held the burner phone in my hand. Emily had been the first to call. They've got them. Picked them up at Per Se, full public spectacle. Her voice sounded tired but deeply satisfied, and the reaction I asked looking out the window at the New York night. Exactly what you expected. Disbelief. Rage. Robert is on the verge of a breakdown. He saw the indictment summary. He knows or suspects this was planned a long time ago. Good. I didn't feel euphoria. Just a massive, clean emptiness like after a long, grueling surgery. And Chloe, where is she? With the nanny. Maria. David dropped her off before dinner. I spoke to the nanny. Told her to stay the night that you would pick Chloe up in the morning. She's scared, but the kid is fine. Thank you, Emily. I took a deep breath. And my part, the loan. It's caught in the crossfire just as we planned. The feds are way more interested in David's wire fraud and the offshore accounts. Your loan looks like an extravagance or one of his schemes. The psychiatric reports we seeded are working miracles. Right now, you are the abused, gaslit wife who was not only robbed but used as a pawn to secure credit. You're a double victim. It plays entirely in your favor. I hung up. A minute later, the primary phone rang. It was David. I let it ring. Once. Twice. 3 times. On the 4th, I answered. I didn't say a word. Olivia. His voice was a roar, a muffled scream of rage and sheer desperation. What did you do? What the fuck did you do, David? I said, using my flattest, most exhausted voice. What's wrong? Are you okay? Don't play dumb with me, you bitch, he spat. I could hear his ragged breathing like a wounded animal. The DOJ complaint, the files, the offshore accounts. You were lying. This whole time, I don't know what you're talking about, David. FBI agents came to my door tonight asking weird questions. I'm terrified. The lie flowed smoothly, automatically. My armor. You're lying. You planned this. You took the money. My money? I don't have any money, David. You took everything. We signed the papers. Remember? I let a tremor, a real one born of adrenaline, slip into my voice. Please, can I talk to Chloe? A guttural growl of pure fury ripped from his throat. Chloe, now you care about her, you used her. This is all some sick revenge. I'm going to destroy you. I'll drag you down with me, David. I don't understand anything you're saying. You must have been drinking. We'll talk tomorrow. And I hung up. I was shaking from head to toe. Not from fear, but from the massive dump of adrenaline. I had heard the sound of his world breaking apart, and it was sweet. Bitter and sweet like ancient wine. The phone rang again. This time, it was Robert. I hesitated but answered. He at least would be cold. Olivia. His voice was a razor blade. Are you alone? Yes. Listen to me carefully. I'm not going to waste time. I know it was you. I know it. I don't have all the proof yet, but I will get it. You moved assets. You made hidden transfers. You used privileged information. What you did to David is a masterpiece of treachery, but it's illegal. I don't know what you're talking about, Robert. I signed whatever my husband and you put in front of me. If something was done illegally or hidden, I was the last to know. I stood my ground. Emily had trained me well for this. The Delaware loan. The shell company, he insisted, trying to catch me off guard. But I don't know anything about that. David handled the finances. I just signed where he told me, just like you signed the invoice for the Swiss consulting firm. Remember, the one that didn't exist. I dropped the name like a cluster bomb. A dead silence fell over the line. I had hit a nerve. He, as David's attorney, had perhaps turned a blind eye to certain things. Or maybe he hadn't. But the mere mention of it put him in a highly delicate position. You're very smart, he said finally, and his tone had shifted. He was no longer just accusing. He was respectful. A dark respect full of hatred. But this isn't over. Your ex-husband is finished. I know that, but you aren't going to walk away clean. The scandal will splatter you and your daughter. My daughter is safe, I said. And this time my voice was steel. Her future is guaranteed far away from her father's lies and thefts. That is the only thing that matters to me, Robert. Have a good night. I hung up before he could respond. I powered off the primary phone. The silence in the apartment was absolute. Minutes later, the burner phone buzzed. Frank. Everything good? Yes. David and Robert called. I know. I was listening. He had tapped the line. You did well. Especially with Robert. He's scared. And now I asked, suddenly feeling the crushing weight of exhaustion falling over me. Now we wait. The federal machinery has started. It's slow but unstoppable. He'll spend the night at the MCC. Tomorrow they'll likely ask for pretrial detention. Flight risk given the offshore accounts. The evidence is overwhelming. And Sarah, she's singing like a canary. It's all David's fault, according to her. He manipulated her, he forced her. She's cooperating. They'll probably let her plea down to lesser charges. It's going to be a pathetic spectacle. He paused. Do you feel sorry? The question caught me off guard. I looked at myself in the pale reflection of the window. Dark but dry eyes. No, I said. And it was the deepest truth I had spoken in years. I only feel sorry I didn't do it sooner. All right. Get some sleep. Tomorrow you pick up your kid and you start explaining to her slowly why her dad isn't going to be around for a very long time. I hung up. I couldn't sleep. I stayed on the sofa wrapped in a blanket watching the lights of the Manhattan skyline. I remembered David's look of pity in the restaurant. I remembered his hand over mine at the lawyer's office. His relief. And now, in a holding cell, that same certainty would have turned into sheer panic. Into the belated realization that everything from his sighs of relief to his champagne toasts had been choreographed by me. That his victory was merely the prologue to his defeat. I smiled in the dark. A smile without joy. A smile of justice. The slow, cold, perfect justice that had taken me 2 years to cook. Outside, an NYPD cruiser drove by with its siren off its blue lights, sweeping fleetingly across my window. It was a reminder. The city kept turning. The law took its course. And for the first time, I wasn't its victim. I was simply a witness, the architect of a collapse. And now, finally, a mother about to reclaim her daughter, to truly start from zero. But this time, on a foundation I had chosen myself. Clean, solid, and mine. The morning light poured through the apartment window, almost too bright, as if trying to scrub away the remnants of the night. I hadn't slept a wink. I made a cup of coffee, my hands steady. I wasn't the woman from before. Not the submissive wife, not the depressed victim, not even the vengeful mastermind. I was a woman who had finished one job and was starting another, being a mother. Just a mother. The intercom buzzed. Yes. It was Maria the nanny. Her voice was tight, subdued. Miss? Olivia, it's me. I have Chloe here. Come up, please. A minute later, the door opened. Chloe stood in the doorway, pale, wearing her private school uniform with her backpack slung over her shoulder. Her eyes were wide. She looked at me, and her face reflected a mix of profound relief and total bewilderment. Maria, standing behind her, looked like she had aged 10 years overnight. Thank you, Maria. I'll pay you for the full month, plus severance. I'll Venmo you the details. She nodded, twisting the strap of her purse. Mr. David. He didn't come home. Mr. David isn't coming back to the house. Not for a long time. The FBI will likely contact you for a statement. Tell them the truth. Only the truth. My voice was calm but firm. Yes, ma'am. She bowed her head and left, leaving my daughter and me alone in the small entryway. Chloe didn't move. Mom. Why are we here? Where is Dad? The police came to the house last night. They talked to Maria. They took his computers and boxes of papers. They said things about Dad. Her voice was a fragile thread ready to snap. I knelt in front of her, bringing myself to her eye level. I took her hands. They were freezing. Chloe. Honey, sit down. We need to talk. I guided her to the small sofa. She sat rigidly, refusing to let go of her backpack strap. Is Dad in jail? The question was direct, brutal. Her eyes searched mine, desperate for a denial. I couldn't lie to her. Not anymore. Yes, Chloe. He's been arrested. The authorities believe he did some very bad things. Things involving money. Very bad things. Like stealing, she whispered. Yes. From his company, from people. From us. I took a deep breath. For a long time, Dad and I weren't happy. He was doing things he shouldn't have been doing. And I found out. I decided we couldn't keep living like that. That I had to protect the most important thing in the world, you. She stared at me, trying to process the magnitude of it all. Is that why you left? Why you signed those papers saying you were leaving without anything to protect me? The lump in my throat was massive. Yes, my love. Because if I fought him for the money for the houses, the fight would have been incredibly ugly. And very long. And you would have been caught right in the middle of it. Dad would have used anything to win, including saying that I wasn't well enough to take care of you. I watched her eyes widen in comprehension. So I let him have everything he thought he wanted, so he would drop his guard. And so that when the bad things he did finally came to light, you wouldn't be anywhere near the blast radius. And neither would I. You turned him in. Her voice trembled, not with anger, but with awe. I helped the truth come to light, I corrected gently. What he was doing was illegal, Chloe. He was hurting people, hiding money, lying. I couldn't let it continue. And above all, I couldn't let everything collapse one day when you were older and drag you down with it. Or worse, have you grow up thinking that's how you're supposed to live, stealing and lying. She looked down, fiddling with the zipper on her backpack. Kids are already talking at school. Stuff is on the internet. They say he's a fraud. The pain for her pierced me like a knife. I know, sweetheart. And I am so sorry. You are going to have to be very strong. Stronger than anyone. But you are not alone. I am here. And this mess, it isn't your fault. And it isn't mine. It is the consequence of the choices your father made. What happens now? She asked, looking up. Tears were brimming in her eyes, but I also saw a flash of the very determination I thought I had buried. Now Dad has to face a federal judge. It's very likely he'll be away for a while. We are going to live here for now. It's small, but it's ours. And you'll keep going to your school. Your life won't change in the ways that truly matter. You will have everything you need. I promise you. How? The question was logical. If you gave Dad everything, I smiled. For the first time with genuine warmth. Because what he kept was a house of cards, my love. And the wind has already blown it down. The things that truly matter. The solid things. I kept those for you. Your future is secure. We'll study, we'll travel, we'll live a quiet life. Far away from the lies. She slumped back against the sofa, exhausted by the tension, digesting the earthquake. You let him think he won, so he would fall harder. The simplicity of her conclusion took my breath away. At 11 years old, she understood it perfectly. Yes, I admitted. I did. Do you think that's bad? She thought about it, looking at her hands. He hurt you. He looked down on you. I saw it. I'm not stupid, Mom. Her words cut deep. I heard you guys fighting at night when you thought I was asleep. I saw how cold you were to each other. He was always on his phone. With her. That woman. A shudder of disgust ran through her small frame. Is she arrested too? Yes. Chloe nodded slowly. Then she stood up, walked to the window, and looked down at the street. A normal Queens block full of normal life. This neighborhood is uglier, she said without turning around. But it doesn't smell like lies here. She spun on her heels and looked at me. My eyes were dry. Okay, Mom, I'm staying with you. They were the most beautiful, heartbreaking words I had ever heard. I opened my arms. She came to me and let herself be held, burying her face in my shoulder. She didn't cry. She just took a deep breath, like she was inhaling clean air after being trapped in a smoky room. I didn't cry either. I held my daughter. My victory. My only true prize. Hours later, while Chloe was resting in her new bedroom, the burner phone rang. It was Frank. Good work with the kid. Simple and clear. Thanks. News lots. David was arraigned. The judge denied bail. Remanded to federal custody, flight risk, and risk of destroying evidence. They cited the Cayman and Delaware accounts. He's at the MCC downtown, the Metropolitan Correctional Center, a far cry from the Metropolitan Club, from the penthouse to an 8x10 cell. And Sarah, she sang the whole aria, blames David entirely. He manipulated her, he forced her. She's cooperating fully with the AUSA. They're moving her to a lower security facility upstate, probably cutting a plea deal for a reduced sentence. It's going to be an ugly show, he paused. And your part. The investigation. You've been subpoenaed to testify before the grand jury next week. Emily has it all prepped. You're the gaslit, financially abused wife who stumbled onto the truth, got terrified, and gathered evidence. The Delaware loan will be presented as David's desperate attempt to secure liquidity by forging your signature. The psych evals back it up perfectly. And Eleanor? My mother-in-law. The question was inevitable. Frank snorted. She's cut from a different cloth. She tried pulling strings, called half the white shoe law firms in Manhattan. But the DOJ's case is so radioactive, even the big sharks are swimming away. She went to see David. I don't know what was said, but rumor has it she told him never to underestimate a woman with wounded pride. Sounds like deep down she almost respects you for it. It wasn't a consolation, but it was justice. Thank you, Frank, for everything. Don't thank me. It was a job and a pleasure. If you need anything else, you know how to find me. Though I doubt you will. You have Emily, and you have this. He meant the executed plan. What about you? I'm taking a vacation somewhere sunny with no cell service. See you around, Olivia. Good luck. I hung up. Another loose end tied. Another witness walking away. I was left alone with the silence of the apartment and the soft sound of my daughter breathing through the wall. In the late afternoon, Emily arrived. She brought paperwork, decent coffee, and a tired but genuine smile. We sat at the small kitchen table. "This is for you," she said, sliding a thick manila envelope across the table. "The statements for the irrevocable trust in the Caymans. It's for Chloe. It's significantly more than you ever would have gotten in a standard divorce settlement. It's clean, perfectly legal, and entirely shielded from federal asset forfeiture related to David's criminal case." I opened the envelope. The numbers danced before my eyes. A fortune. The fortune he had been stealing and that I had patiently methodically redirected. And the Greenwich house, the penthouse seized by the feds. The banks will foreclose. Everything in his name is going down in flames. You, Olivia, own absolutely nothing on paper. You are officially a woman with zero net worth, which makes you immune to civil liability here. But in practice, you are entirely independent, acting as the sole trustee of your daughter's fortune. It's elegant. And cruel. I corrected. Emily nodded. Just. Your prep meeting with the AUSA is on Thursday. I'll be with you. You just have to stick to your story. The woman who woke up from a nightmare and found the courage to act despite her fear. It's not a story, I said, looking her in the eye. It's the truth. She held my gaze. I know. That's why it will work. She left at dusk. I made dinner for Chloe and me. Grilled cheese and tomato soup. Something simple. Comforting. We ate in silence, but it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was the silence of two shipwreck survivors who had finally washed up on a safe shore. Mom, Chloe said when she finished. "Can we put a picture of the two of us up here?" "Of course, honey. We'll buy a frame tomorrow." She nodded, satisfied. Then she looked down at her empty bowl. "And Dad, will we be able to visit him?" The question hurt, but it was fair. "Yes, when he's allowed visitors. If you want to go, I will never stop you. But I want you to know that he might not be the same person you remember. Pride and prison, they change people." "I know," she said with a sadness far too heavy for her age. "But he's my dad." "Yes," I whispered. "He is." That night, while Chloe slept, I stepped out onto the small fire escape balcony. The air was crisp. The Manhattan skyline sparkled in the distance, totally indifferent. Over there, in a federal holding cell, David Rachel was beginning to understand the sheer magnitude of his ruin. Not just financial, moral, familial. He had lost his empire of lies, his accomplice, and the respect of his daughter. And worst of all, he knew he had been utterly defeated by the woman he had underestimated the most. I didn't feel euphoria. I felt peace. A profound peace, excavated with the patience of 2 years of silence and cunning. I had used his own weapons, his greed, his arrogance, his contempt against him. I had let him believe he was winning, only to snatch it all away in a single devastating blow precisely when it was too late for him to react. It wasn't a happy ending. It was a just ending. I had saved my daughter from the shipwreck. I had saved myself. And I had given David the most bitter gift of all, the truth about himself. The primary phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from an unknown number. "It's Robert. We need to talk. It's about your daughter." I looked at it. The desperate last gasp of a cornered man trying to protect another or trying to leverage something for himself. I smiled without humor. I powered the phone off and tossed it in the trash can. There was no rush. The law would take its course, and I would finally take mine. With my daughter, with my truth, with my life, at last. Firmly in my own hands. The revenge was over. The justice, too. Now began the hard, beautiful part living. I breathed in the clean night air, stepped back inside, and closed the door to begin.